Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 8th, 2013 Wheeling Workshop meeting. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call.
Trustee Brady?
Here.
Trustee Kruger?
Present.
Trustee Lang?
Here.
Trustee Vogel?
Here.
Trustee Hein?
Here.
Trustee here informed the board he would not be here this evening, and President Argyris.
Here. We have a proclamation this evening, Madam Clerk.
In memory of Esther Nofke. Esther Nofke was a longtime resident of the village of Wheeling, living for many of those years on what is now Chicago Executive Airport property. Esther Nofke joined the WASP, Women Air Force Service Pilots Organization in 1943, received her pilot certificate in June 1944, and was assigned to B-26 flying duty at McGowan Field, Boise, Idaho. In 1945, Esther Nofke joined Priester Aviation as a flight instructor, as Priester Aviation began operations as a flight training school at what was then Pewaukee Airport. In 1953, Esther Nofke became the administrative assistant to George Priester as he and his team continued the development of Pewaukee Airport. While employed by Priester Aviation from 1970 to 1972, Ms. Nofke served on the Women's Advisory Committee on Aviation under President Lyndon Johnson. Esther Nofke was elected to the Illinois Aviation Hall of Fame in 1977 in recognition of her service to aviation in Illinois. Esther Nofke received the Congressional Gold Medal in April 2010 as the WASP was recognized for service to our country. Dean Argyris, President of the Village of Wheeling in the counties of Cook and Lake, does hereby proclaim the village's condolences on the recent passing of Esther Nofke and calls upon the Wheeling community to honor her memory in recognition of her inspirational achievements.
Alan. Extend our sympathy to her family and to Mr. Priester. What a legend.
She be humbled and honored, and I thank everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Citizens' concerns and comments?
Mr. Stylen?
Thank you, Mr. President and trustees. Terry Stylen, 473 Briarwood Drive in town. Just like to say thank you very much for the fireworks and the band. Fireworks were excellent, band was exceptional, and the sound system was great. I mean, you guys really did a good job in a very short period of time, and I'm glad that the weather kind of held out for us. And it was nice seeing the big crowd that eventually showed up. That was great. Next thing I'd like to say is, you know, that I'm a very big proponent of the airport and want you guys, there's an item on the agenda tonight for the airport, and I just want you guys to know that I feel the airport is really a big asset for this city, and we need to nurture it and keep it going. And I was a little bit disappointed when I looked at the Southeast TIF plan and didn't see any comments on any kind of overlay that might foster development that was oriented towards uses that might be conducive to the airport. Sidewalks is always on the agenda tonight as well, and you know I'm a big proponent of sidewalks, and I know that there was a lot of discussion about funds and how much it's going to cost and all kinds of stuff, and just I didn't see it in the current report, but you know, asphalt is a little bit cheaper, and in some locations you know, we use asphalt for bike paths and stuff like that. In certain areas around town where properties aren't developed, maybe asphalt might be a reasonable temporary substitute for concrete, and you know, it's a lot cheaper. You might be able to do a few more feet of asphalt every year rather than being restricted to the price of concrete. So that's it. thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you, Terry.
Mr. Heber?
My name is George Heber, 237 Cindy Lane, longtime residence. I was very happy to see the fireworks come back. I think it was really good for what amount of time that was put into it. It went wonderful, and there was quite a crowd. I don't know exactly how many. I think we had 3 or 4 different guesses going. I don't know which one was closest, but it was good, and I met a lot of people I haven't seen in a couple of years. Which is nice also. I thank the board for putting this together and everybody involved in it. Public Works, I imagine, did a whole bunch. And now a quick reminder of the blood drive. Coming up this Wednesday, July 10th, our president said he wanted to see 97. I don't think we'll reach that goal, but we give it a shot. And some of these NRA guys, they can come.
Sure.
They're very welcome. And I know I have maybe one I've seen in all the years donate blood since I've been doing it. So we can use a lot more. And blood is a necessity. You can't live without it. I thank you. I thank the board for everything they've done.
Thank you, George. That's it? Item number 6, discussion.
On discussion request for liquor license from Party Fantasy Incorporated, 7150 Capitol Drive.
Mr. Svandelos?
Thank you. The petitioner is here and can describe in detail and talk a little bit about the use, but a little bit of explanation before we get into that. This is coming before you as the Board of Trustees as a discussion item as opposed to the Liquor Control Commission, because this is a bit of an anomaly as the request doesn't neatly fit into any of the specific classes that we currently have on the books. We've discussed the party fantasy concept several times in the past, and of course it's an approved concept that is now 2 to 3 weeks away from opening?
We're hoping to open first week of August.
First week of August, excellent. And there's been a recent request for a liquor license component as part of their business plan. I'll let the petitioner describe exactly what that plan is, but again, because this particular use doesn't fit neatly into any of the classes, we wanted to bring this to you as a board as a discussion item to either create a new class that would specifically identify this user, or amend Class M, which is currently the recommendation, if the board sees fit to even grant a liquor license to an establishment where there is a component of moving vehicles. This is a go-kart facility, and perhaps that's a good way to turn this over to you to describe exactly what the use is and then how you would handle catering and alcohol inside the facility.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Adi Moore. I'm the owner of Party Fantasy. I live in Highland Park, 67 Laurel in Highland Park. Party Fantasy is family entertainment. Part of our business is doing bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, and a lot of parties that bring about 200 people in. We are not asking to sell liquor in our store. We're asking to have a liquor when we have cater for parties. And we do not want to store liquor on premises. We do not want to sell liquor in our place. We want to have the option of providing people with a party that will host liquor. As far as our policy, we do have I do own a liquor license in all our municipalities that we do business with, and you can check on our integrity. We have a business license for liquor in Northbrook, we have in Mundelein, we have in Naperville, and in Round Lake Beach, I'm sorry. And you can check our records over there too. We have a policy, no tolerance policy. If you drive, if you drink, you can't drive, even one drink. And the way we control it is we stamp people's hand. So once they stamp, they can't drive. And we emphasized that way before, because part of our business is corporate events, and people come for corporate, and we want to have this option of giving our customers this opportunity.
Thank you. Questions?
Question.
Trustee here. Lang, I'm sorry.
Can you go over the wristband details for controlling drinking and driving?
No, we don't use wristband for drinking and driving. We use wristband for a different purpose. We use wristband to keep kids not to leave the premises without having adult involved. So we count, if there is a party for 20 kids, we give them 20 wristbands, and we count the 20 wristbands when they go out. For liquor, we stamp on the hands, so they can't erase it.
Okay, in reading this report, you talked about possibly someone washing that hand stamp off. So you had an option for wristbands, and the wristband would be cut. Everyone got a wristband, the wristband would be cut if someone was drinking. That seems pretty logical. So,
Well, what we're concerned with is we put a wristband, people can take them off and come to drive after the drink. Very simple. We emphasize to everyone before they even come in, if you drink, you don't drive.
okay. Well, how do you propose stopping people from washing that stamp off?
It takes at least 48 hours this stamp to be washed out of your hand. It's this fluorescent thing that you don't even see it, and when you go under the light, you see it in your hand.
Okay. Other than that, I don't really have a problem with the liquor license here.
Trustee Hein.
Thank you. I would imagine with this type of a operation that you're going to be soliciting corporate business.
Yes, sir.
What percentage of your business you project to be corporate business?
Wheeling place would be a little unique because at Wheeling location we are geared for much older client. Of course, we have the dancing floor and the climbing walls and the inflatables, but most people don't drink. If you have a group of 50 people or 100 people that come from a corporate event, usually they come after work, and they really don't drink. And if they drink, they can't drive. So percentage-wise, I assume maybe 30% of the people will drink from a group of 100.
What I'm getting at is how much corporate business are you looking for? Are you going to be doing 50% of your business is going to be corporate, or 30%?
No, sir. Our corporate business is less than 10%.
Okay. I know in the past we have had different, I believe, is it in the M code that we allow so many per year? Or do we have anything like that now where we?
That's a special event license.
Okay.
Class M is straight banquet facility. I mean, I can read it if you'd like, but no, there's no, once you give the license, they have that license for as many events as they like. The special use license was limited to a number per year.
Well, I'm leaning towards creating another class and putting this in a separate class by itself, rather than the M class, and putting a stipulation in there that to be used so many times. That's what I'm looking at.
Putting a limit on how many times you can use it in a calendar year?
Yeah, that's why I asked the question.
I just want to emphasize, this will be a great sales tax revenue for the village, because this is a full 10% tax when we do a banquet, and average bar mitzvah is $20,000-$25,000, so I think it will be a great benefit for the village. And limiting how many, we book stuff we book party for almost a year ahead of time. And I think it would be very difficult for us to book stuff ahead of time if we don't know that we can do it.
Well, I always treat the liquor business as being a special It's actually a privilege to have a liquor license. And I don't want to deter your business. I want to make sure that you're successful. However, I want to make sure that we got rules and regulations in place, because you're actually wearing two hats here. I don't know how many of those folks that are going to be going over there to drive those vehicles over there and go onto your track, but I want to make sure that we don't have a greater percentage of young people going there and being exposed to that element. I really don't think that's necessary.
Well, like I said, we are not going to sell liquor on premises, so there is no reason for young youth to come over there for drinking unless they come for a party. That's one thing. All our employees are BASA trained when it comes to liquor license, and most municipalities check our stores almost on a monthly basis, and I think we have a great record for the last 20 years. So,
Thank you.
Trustee Vogel?
You mentioned you had several liquor licenses in other communities. Are any
Yes,
of
sir.
these associated with Party Fantasy, or are they associated with your grocery stores?
grocery stores.
Okay, so you don't have any experience of having a liquor license with a facility like this?
We do have license from the Village of Highland Park for Ravinia, so we do catering out of Northbrook to Ravinia, and we have a catering company too under our.
Oh, well, Ravinia doesn't have go-karts, do they?
Well, we're talking about liquor.
Liquor, yeah, well, I'm talking about the go-kart concept. You don't have any experience with the
No.
go-kart concept? Okay. How fast do these carts go?
About 20, 25.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Trustee Brady?
Thank you. You know, if we're concerned about the fact of somebody drinking, whatever, however they get it, and jumping on these carts and running around there, you know, we could always, in a liquor license, put a stipulation in there, if somebody is hurt or injured on that track and they've been drinking, that's a liquor license violation. Subject to fines or whatever. That'll kind of prompt them to enforce that a little bit stricter. I don't know if we can do it, but Mr. Smith might be able to help us with that.
Yes, that type of condition could be added to a new class of license if one was created here. A violation, could be created in the way that you suggested.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Can I piggyback on that?
Sure.
In fact, Trustee Brady, that's probably the only tool we would have for enforcement, because liquor would only be available as part of a catered event. It would be difficult for us to do any kind of enforcement, our normal enforcement process. So actually, that is something we were thinking about as well.
Good.
For me, a couple things. Are you going to have liquor on the premises, or per event they're going to bring the liquor there?
Vendor will bring the liquor in and take it out when the party is over.
So how does the gram shop and all that stuff work with that? Greg?
If the business is granted a liquor license, they would need to have dram shop insurance in order to allow the liquor onto their premises, and the caterer would also need to
Right.
provide dram shop insurance as well.
And
The
how do we police that?
The way it works on the contract is there's parties with liquor and parties without liquor. There is additional cost for the liquor per person when you ask for liquor in the party.
Was it always your intention to have liquor at that establishment? Your
Yes,
business?
sir.
It was. Then why wasn't it brought up to the Plan Commission then? You mentioned it during the Plan Commission hearing, but why didn't you pursue it with the application at that time?
Because I don't want to put too many items on the plate at one time, Obviously, at the village, you have to present one step and go to the next step and then the other step, and this is the direction we want to
Yeah,
take
but the
it.
problem with that is, it is a special use here. Is it not, Mr. Janik? And now, part of the special use is now being amended before us tonight, asking for this liquor license and serving liquor at this establishment, which was mentioned at the Plan Commission but never continued as part of any conditions or consideration.
Typically, serving alcohol is special use with a use, such as with the restaurant. If the restaurant wanted to serve alcohol and they weren't serving it, that would be a change to special use. With this particular sort of alcohol distribution, there is some question as to whether or not it technically meets the special use standard. We'd have to get the liquor license, of course. Whether it would have to go for a special use is something I think I'd have to review with the attorney.
But again, I'm worried about setting a bad precedent here by doing this. Trustee Heim brings up a case where we have special licensing for special events. I mean, the folks here from Signature have used it. Priester has used it. They come in here, the church has used it. It doesn't affect their special use or the operation that they have, but occasionally they have a special event and they'll ask for a special license. This is a permanent thing here. And to be honest with you, by putting too many things on your plate, you already got the plate full. You should have done it then. To me, you're changing your use now, in my opinion. So I truly believe that, because is there safety concerns? I mean, where are they hosting these parties, these banquets? Where are you going to have a designated area? I mean, you're going to have kids there. He brings up bar mitzvah, by mitzvahs and stuff like that. You're going to have kids there, along with adults, I understand. But I just think we're setting a bad precedent here. I mean, we're going to have somebody else come in here that we granted a special use last month and turn around and say, oh, by the way, we're going to do this now, without going through the process of the Plan Commission. So one of your recommendations in this packet of ours is maybe get a consensus from the board. If we want to see this thing go back to the Plan Commission, put his application in for the type of use that he's asking for here regarding the liquor license, and we move on. If they're going to amend it, let it be a recommendation through the Plan Commission to amend it, not for us to do it. That's the way I look at it. Any
Well, and we did
concerns
that
with
specifically for that reason. If the board flat out is going to say no, as the ruling body, as the Liquor Commission as well, that's why we're bringing this to you as a discussion item, much like a concept review.
Right.
So I would agree that's staff's recommendation. If the answer is you're willing to consider it, that it can then go through the process back to the PC.
questions? Consensus? Trustee
do it.
Lang? Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Heim?
Back to the PC.
Trustee Brady?
Yes.
Trustee Kruger?
Back to the PC.
And myself. Welcome you back at the PC. Thank you. Item number 7.
Excuse me, I didn't understand what,
Mr. Janik will sit down and he'll explain it to you. It shouldn't be a long process, but there's some things in here that need to be clarified with the Plan Commission along with our staff, and then you can come back here and go through the process of getting your liquor license.
thank you.
Thank you. Number 7.
Discussion regarding sidewalk policy updates.
Mr. Janik?
As Mark takes the podium, I'd like to introduce this topic that has been before the board in the past. In fact, it has been quite some time since we last talked about the sidewalk policy. It last came up as a discussion item over the cost per linear foot that we amend usually on an annual basis for the portion that we charge back for the sidewalk, quote-unquote, the sidewalk fund. As the system currently works, it is one of two things happen when there is new construction. Either there's a requirement for a sidewalk to be installed, or there's a contribution made into the sidewalk fund. That process is split. It is on a case-by-case basis, which creates some confusion. So when we last discussed what is the sidewalk fund, how much money is in it, where are we going, what is the goal of it, we told the board that we would come back with a larger package discussion, which is very detailed, but actually can be whittled down to some pretty basic points. The slide that you see on the overhead right now is the result of the active transportation plan analysis that has been ongoing for the past year. It was a happy coincidence that that process was already in motion when we decided to talk about the sidewalk fund, because when we talk about the fund, we have to have an end goal in mind, which is where we have to identify where the holes, where the gaps are in our current sidewalk system. And this is going to be gone over in a little more detail than I'm giving now, but what you see in red on the screen are the gaps in our sidewalk system right now. Once we identified the gaps, we were able to work backwards financially to put a number as to how much money it would cost to fill those gaps, which then allowed us to calculate a solution. The solution that staff has come up with, and there are a couple of considerations for the board, but the solution that staff is recommending is a flat rate increase to the construction permit fee of 0.35%. This increase would then work to eliminate the current confusion between, well, what is someone required to do? Are they required to build a sidewalk, or are they required to contribute to the fund? The idea now is, now that we've identified all these gaps in our system, everyone pays this 0.35%. The village takes over responsibility for constructing the sidewalks based on the priority identified in the active transportation plan. That way, it's fair and equitable to everyone, and it gives us an annual plan for finality to the sidewalk plan. Because now that we've calculated the total cost, we can estimate that it will be between 10 to 15 years for us to complete the entire community, and we will have filled all the gaps. So with that, I'll turn over to Mark to fill in any of my gaps, and then we'll come back and ask the board some specific questions as far as direction to where to take it from here.
Thank you. I think John explained it well. The only thing that, not the only thing, but the important consideration for the board is the active transportation plan talks about sidewalks, talks about the gaps, talks about priorities, and it does suggest a 10-year plan to do that. Now, relative to our calculation, the cost of sidewalks, it would take, or to do it in 10 years would take a flat fee at least of about, it's almost 1%. Now, just for your information, on a typical building permit, the fees we have currently total about 1.5% of the total value of the permit. What the board needs to consider if we do any kind of flat fee is how much what of an increase in that total fee there's going to be. Now, in our opinion, almost 1% or 0.81 is a substantial, it's too large of a fee to add on to, say, a building permit. Engineering permit, for instance, is 3.5%. It's a lot higher than building permit, typically. Some building permits are higher percentage than others. So what we're suggesting, and even our suggestion, is a substantial increase. 0.35% is more than 20% of a typical, say, building permit. But it would provide the amount of money that's shown in the correspondence, a little bit over $150,000. That's about 0.6 of a mile at 5 feet wide, concrete sidewalk, assuming that each square foot is is $12 per square foot. So we would do 0.6 miles per year. 0.6 miles equates to, let's say you just take the high priority sidewalks that are provided as part of the active transportation plan. It would take about 6 years to fill in those high priority gaps of sidewalk at 0.35 of 1% increase. That's really it. I mean, the fact is that there has to be some sort of revenue source to get the money together for the sidewalks. Currently in the village code, the only technical time for requirement of sidewalk construction is during subdivision. There is no other technical time for a sidewalk. And we have been requesting through the Planning Commission and the board, been requesting various developments to provide sidewalk, but this would provide a much stronger and much more consistent source for funds to complete the sidewalk or sidewalks in town. Of course, with more sidewalk, As everybody knows, through the CIP experience, more sidewalks mean more maintenance, public works, keeping the sidewalks clean, keeping them in proper shape, that sort of thing. So there are long-term implications as well. But I think that, providing sidewalks is very important for the community. So I'm here for questions.
Trustee Brady?
I'm not in favor of adding any fees to building permits right now. I think we did our best to try and raise them to an acceptable level a few years ago. And if we're going to pay for this, first of all, once we get a program where we know where the money's going to be that we collect from all the people that don't want to put them in the sidewalk fund, we'll know what we can do every year in extra sidewalks. Right now, we get money in our budget to not only for replacement of sidewalks, but I think there's money in there every year to add sidewalks, based on that and keep going. But, I'd like to see it done in 15 or 20 years, but according to this report, which is quite elaborate, by the way, it's going to take $5.445 million to put in this 18 miles of sidewalk. That's a lot of money.
That's correct. It
is.
is.
A lot of money. And who knows 15 years from now what the price of this is going to be. We might never get caught up. I like the idea of the program. I don't want to put any more burdens on adding fees. We talk about development, we talk about everything. We have people that come in here with developments, and we've say, okay, you want to put the sidewalks in or don't you? You have the option of putting the money into a fund, and if they do, we can use that. And that's what the biggest thing, the best thing in this whole report is the priorities. Which is the priority area? Which is the area that really needs sidewalks? Which is the area that the need is far off, that we don't have to have immediately? And taken based on that, it kind of whittles it down to what has to be done in the next 5 years is reasonable. That's right for now. That's really my thoughts on this. Thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
Certainly, that makes sense, but just to be clear, while this would be an increase to the permit fee, it would also then negate the requirement for construction of sidewalk in instances where it's required. So while it is technically an increase to the fee, there is a wash that would be coming off the back end, because we would no longer be requiring, those people who are required to construct or contribute to the fund would no longer, they're allocating that money anyway, but instead of it being a specific allocation there, it would be an increase to the fee. So they would be paying money whether we institute this fee or not. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, except it is a fact that there are not a lot of developments that are required to put the sidewalk in. Subdivisions of land are required to put sidewalks in. But outside of that, right now, there isn't a technical requirement for a development. If somebody comes in with a 100,000 square foot, or excuse me, $100,000 addition to, say, a industrial building, if they're not subdividing, they're just improving the interior, they're not required to put in a sidewalk or any part of a sidewalk unless they're asked and they agree to it. The way this is written, that $100,000 permit would have a slight fee increase that would be put in, and that money be put into the sidewalk fund for future.
In other words, from the point of adoption of this here, the village of Wheeling would be responsible for putting all sidewalks in.
I think if this was accepted, I think I would have to come back to you with, other kinds of scenarios. If it was the flat fee was decided upon tonight, but generally speaking, that's correct. Generally speaking, that's
This would be for all building permits?
That's correct.
On?
Building and engineering permits, that's correct.
Okay. That's something to think about.
Trustee Lang?
Thank you. I know it wasn't in the report at all, but we had been collecting over the years for a contribution fund from businesses. Is there an amount in that fund? I know it's not in any separate account anywhere, but is there amount of that funding that can kind of jumpstart this program?
There actually is a separate fund for the sidewalk collection, so far, and it's a relatively minimal amount. And so right now, it's I'm not sure if Mr. Montier knows the exact amount, but I believe it's less than $20,000, so it's really not an amount.
Okay,
that
so it's
could
nothing
jumpstart.
to jumpstart this? and
Not really.
Get it going, okay.
Mike, can you fill in the gap, please?
Sure. There's not specifically a sidewalk fund. What we do is we account for the money through a balance sheet account, but nonetheless, we track it. And currently, there's less than $10,000 in that fund. When we take the money in, and then when there's sidewalk improvements to be made, we charge it against that revenue.
Okay, so you've been using it along the way too? Okay, great. Well, I think we should do something, but maybe not get as aggressive as raising it to 0.81%. I think the staff recommendation of 0.35 is a little more tolerable and doable. It'll take a little longer, but I think that's a better plan overall. So that's the one I'm in favor of.
Okay. Trustee Krueger?
I agree with Trustee Lang that the 0.35 is better than the 0.81 for fear of too high, then makes us not builder-friendly. Maybe we would lose building permits if it was, too high of an increase on their burden. I guess as far as sidewalks and where sidewalks go are concerned, I have a question, and it's perhaps too simple, but if a developer or let's say someone who's going to build a single-family home says, do they have a choice between the contribution to a fund or building it themselves? Wouldn't they be able to get the sidewalk done maybe less expensive because they already have a contractor for their build out, and that maybe they'd say, well, I'd rather just build it myself, and because that would be less expensive than paying the fee to a sidewalk fund?
Yes, that would be one of the, if this went forward, I would look at situations like that and bring it back to the board and just make sure everybody fully understood like a situation like that. Now, generally speaking, many, I would say, the vast majority of, say, single-family lots in Wheeling have sidewalks in front of them. Some do not, though. And that alternative could be provided to the person who was building a house. There's not a lot of those scenarios out there, but there are some. And I think at that time, either the board or we would have to make a determination where that money should be spent, because somebody might want to spend it in front of their lot, but there's no sidewalk even anywhere around it. Is it better to spend someplace else? I think that would be a situation that it's a situation that could happen, and it would have to be talked about.
Okay, thank you.
Can I piggyback on that answer? I agree with Director Janik's last statement. One of the concerns and one of the problems with the current system is that, it's either build it or contribute. That's where we're at right now. And one of the problems that build it or contribute leads us to is, okay, if I choose to build it, now we have a sidewalk to nowhere. So I would actually respond to your question by saying, while there may be some instances where we're talking about subdivision of land, that the answer would be, it's a flat fee and a flat response of contribute to the fund. That way we can stay on program with the priority of installation, and that way we can ensure that there's no sidewalks to nowhere and that we get from point A to point B throughout the entire community in an appropriate manner.
Good, thank you.
Trustee Vogel? Couple of questions. First, just for my information, is there anything magic to a 5-foot wide sidewalk? I mean, if we went 4 foot, does that mean the cost would be 20% less?
That's correct. It would be. Our typical sidewalk minimum is 5 feet wide, though, in our code. We do have wider sidewalks along some thoroughfares, but our typical sidewalk, I don't think we have any public sidewalks that are less than 5 feet. Okay. I mean, there might be a few out there that were built maybe a long time ago, but generally speaking, our standard is 5 foot wide sidewalk.
Is there any areas where 4 foot would suffice that we could change our code? I mean, if it's really low traffic areas, I mean, I see sidewalks that look like they're brand new. They're probably 20 years old. I don't think there's been a footprint on them over in the industrial complex sometimes.
I think it's possible.
Is it? Something to consider. The other thing is the contribution or put your own sidewalk in, is there any way to put our hands around that total number, what that value is? I mean, let's say I'm person A and I decide to put my sidewalk in, and I'm paying $3,500 to put it in, and Bill decides not to and he contributes $1,500. Is there any way to come up with that total number to compare that to the 0.35? That if we're going to drop the contribution and not require them to put their own sidewalk in any longer and adopt the 0.35 permit fee, that's going to replace both people putting their own sidewalk in and or making a contribution to the sidewalk fund, correct?
Well, right now, there is no requirement for contribution, unless it's asked for and then they agree to it. The only time it's technically required is when there's a subdivision of land. We don't get very many subdivisions of land in the village because the village is built out to a large extent. So there's very few subdivisions. That's why some of the frustration, particularly at the Planning Commission when developments come in and from the board, there just isn't a vehicle to fund the sidewalks.
Okay.
Except for this subdivision, and then very few of those.
Maybe make my question clearer. You're saying that if with this 0.35% fee, we're likely going to generate around $150,000 a year.
That's correct.
Are we ahead of the ballgame or behind it compared to having them put their own sidewalks in per our request or requirement and their contribution? I mean, is the value of them installing their own sidewalks plus the contributions that we request for the sidewalk fund greater or more than $150,000?
I believe that we'd be way ahead.
We would be way ahead with
Yeah,
0.35, so we're not losing out.
And I would also suggest that maybe as part of the CIP program itself, that the CIP, reacting to a question from Trustee Brady or a comment by him a little while ago, CIP program would also put some money into that to add to it. So maybe every year there will be $35,000, $45,000 toward new sidewalks as well. That would go into this fund and then allow us to build more.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Hein?
Thank you. I think staff did a pretty good job identifying some of the areas where we have a certain need for sidewalks. I just want to make sure I'm looking at this map correctly. It's kind of hard to read the streets and so on and so forth. But in the upper left-hand corner up there, is that all PUD up there? That's Lakeside, Cedar Run?
Yes, those are PUDs.
Okay. They have no sidewalks.
I believe there are some. I mean, there definitely are some sidewalks, say, along Lexington Drive.
Are they included in your sidewalk plan?
Yes, and it appears that they are included. Looks like there's numerous sidewalks up there that are.
And the Arlington Club is also included in your sidewalk plan?
There are sidewalks all over Arlington Club. There could be some gaps here and there, but I think Arlington Club has sidewalks all through it.
Cedar Run?
I believe that's part of the.
I believe they have any sidewalks over there. But it looks like they're also included in the plan. What I'm getting at is when these PUDs went in many, many years ago, that's what they wanted. That's what they wanted, the urban look, the whatever, and they opt not to have sidewalks. And every one of these places now have homeowners associations and such. Do they really belong in the sidewalk plan? Because when they went before the PC in those days, or the Zoning Board of Appeals, that was one of the things that they really emphasized, that they did not want sidewalks. And everybody bought over there, knowing that they weren't going to have sidewalks.
Trustee Hunt, you bring up an excellent point, and one of the things that's in the analysis is because the sidewalk locations are prioritized, that we would do only the high priority ones now and then reevaluate specifically for that reason as we get into the mid and low priorities. I think that's a great question and something that absolutely needs to be considered.
Well, I think that if we took those out of the equation, we'd see a dollar amount decrease very rapidly. Avalon, Sienna, Arlington, Shadow Bend, Tahoe, all those places were designed not to have sidewalks. So I think our concern should be where we have older parts of our community, that we link those up rather quickly. And all of our schools, libraries, so on and so forth, in place we got a gap going to school where children are walking on sidewalks, and then there are no sidewalks. Those should take top priority, and I'm sure that you're doing that. One of the things also that I think that we should be looking at, and it's a part of the active transportation plan, is to look at where we should be putting in crosswalks. Designated crosswalk with proper signage. And it fits hand in hand with this project. Thank you.
Mr. Janik, how would the contribution work from a developer in the industrial park that, based on your inventory sheet here and priority list, there would never be sidewalks put there ever? Would they still have to contribute to sidewalks even though they don't, are going to benefit from having sidewalks there?
That's correct. This study and this proposal assumes that the fee on a industrial building that, say, doesn't have a sidewalk in front of it, the money would go toward the greater good. So it would go someplace where a lot of people would, need to use the sidewalk. Just as Trustee Hines said, the study is if you see these concentric circles, it focuses on where the important locations are in the village, the high, medium, low. And yes, that money would not go to, say, a place that there was very low activity. It would go to a higher activity location.
And your priority list of where sidewalks need to go in based on the active transportation plan, do we have monies in there for land acquisition for right-of-ways? Have we acquired all the right-of-ways to put these sidewalks in?
I got to tell you, I don't believe there is property required for the high priority locations. It's possible, but I don't believe that there is.
Well, example, across the street, we're still waiting, right, for sidewalks?
We're actually looking at putting one in possibly even this year as part of a water main project.
Okay, but we're still trying to acquire properties.
That's correct, we are.
As a general answer, that's correct. There are still some properties that need to be acquired as part of this, which is part of the cost.
Now, some of those are easements as well that maybe aren't going to be costing us very much money, if any. We do put sidewalks in public easements as well.
And currently, what do we budget every year for replacement of sidewalks, existing sidewalks? What kind of monies are we spending?
I believe this year we have about $75,000. Mr. Stavros, is that about right, per year?
It's over 100. I'm not exactly sure what the number is.
To replace existing sidewalks, not to put any new ones in?
Repair.
Repair.
Well, if you're repairing them, you're replacing some of them, right? Mm-hmm. And let me ask you something regarding the general area around here. How does our fee structure for permits compare to other communities around us?
It's lower. Relatively, it's lower than most other communities on a general basis.
Can you explain something to me on one of the pages here, page 3? You have the new Starbucks. You gave examples here. Single-family home, Angus Edition, and Marco's Pizza. How do we apply these new rules, and how do we justify the new percentage of the 50% rule, the 25% rule, the 10% rule here?
Okay.
How does that work?
Okay, now on that page, what we did was there's two different ways of raising this money potentially. The way we've been talking about it is flat fee. That's just a flat fee across the building permit. What you're looking at on that page is a proposal as part of the active transportation plan, and those scenarios you see there is the mathematics behind what is suggested in the active transportation plan. If you're not going to do a flat fee, this is a method that they've used and other communities have used in different situations. What I did there was just give you guys an example using the different method, not the flat fee, but the method that's suggested as part of the plan. This is how it would work. Now, for me to go through these, you have to really look at what's in the plan, but this gives you an idea of how much it would cost for different projects that have come in or would come in.
Is this consistent with other communities around us and how they do this? Or are we going to be different here?
I've not made a study on what communities around us do relative to revenue for the gaps in the sidewalks. So I can't tell you that this is, maybe Mr. Jennings could shed some light on this. Andrew, is this typical, this mathematics typical for communities around us or no?
We couldn't find anything that was exactly like the situation we had where the number of gaps in the sidewalk network was comparable. We can look around, but we didn't find anything thus far that had a network that was similar enough to ours to be a useful comparison.
Which is one of two reasons why the flat fee is the recommendation from staff. The second reason being, as you pointed out, President Argyris, that page of the memo requires an awful lot of explanation. That obviously means there's a lot of confusion, and we think unnecessarily so. To try and scale the contribution based on percentages and square feet would be, we think, cumbersome to everyone involved, staff and the developer. And along with the flat fee being probably the best manner to collect revenue for sidewalk extensions.
And that's fine, and I appreciate all the hard work you guys did in there, but my concern is if we're doing a flat fee and we're the only ones around here doing flat fees, where in some cases it could be thousands of dollars for new development, or somebody who we encouraged to do upgrades that are either their home or their business, and now all of a sudden they have this flat fee they have to deal with on a permitting basis. I'm concerned that we're going to maybe shoot ourselves in the foot and shoot ourselves out of the market regarding new development or taking care of existing businesses and buildings here in this community and encourage that new building and fixing up facade programs and stuff like that. That's the only thing that concerns me with this thing. I like to see more of what other people are doing in their communities to bring in sidewalks. I mean, to put the burden in here in your sidewalk inventory list here, to turn around and put sidewalks now into Shadow Bend, Cedar Run, this one, that, all over the place here, and have that burden put onto a guy that wants to come in here and establish a new business in here, create jobs in here. I don't think that's fair. I really don't. I mean, it's no different than water and sewer or anything else. You know what? Everybody pays across the board for everything. We all pay taxes here, and we pay a lot. And now to throw this in here, I'm just concerned that we hurt ourselves down the road just to try to put some dollars into a sidewalk fund and try to get caught up here on sidewalks that we haven't supposedly not collected only $10,000 all these years or have into this fund. I mean, we're spending over $100,000 a year of repair. I mean, if you want to raise your fees a little bit across the board and justify those increases to put towards new sidewalks or something else, like we did with the user tax, the utility tax for the capital, help fund the capital improvements throughout this community that everybody benefits for, I think that's a great idea. But I have concerns regarding shooting ourselves in the foot and putting ourselves out of the market, out of the game because of some of these fees.
I think it's safe to say that every community, whether they have a fee just for sidewalks or not, every community's got to keep up their sidewalks. There's many, let's take Arlington Heights. I know they've got miles and miles of sidewalks. They're in the same situation we are. How they raise that money, they do it somehow. Whether they do it strictly with a sidewalk fee to a building permit or some other method rolled up into some other revenue source, it's going to be there.
No, I understand, and I was hoping in the report that we would have saw some comparables and see how other towns around us are doing it. That's all I'm saying. I mean, we have an airport, we're building a brand new hangar over there, and we made this guy put in sidewalks, and I'm at fault of it as well. Sidewalks going to nowhere.
Correct.
Where Signature doesn't have it, or the guy, or International Aviation doesn't have it, but Mr. Tingoose has it, going to nowhere. That's all I'm saying. I mean, we got to use a little common sense here. And again, I like to prioritize sidewalks on Dundee Road. We've been talking about Dundee Road for years. We talk about land acquisition for years, acquiring right-of-ways for years, and we're still walking on broken asphalt across the street.
So I think some of these things, if we can get a year or two on some of the repairs that maybe aren't in desperate need this year and focus on adding some new sidewalks on our main corridors here, I think that's a benefit to the residents and to the businesses around here. But again, you're asking for direction, a consensus here. There are two questions, I believe, before us, right? One being, should the village commence construction of sidewalks as recommended in the active transportation plan? You got a question, Trustee Brady?
Question.
Okay, we'll go to Trustee Brady first.
In this F2 map that we have here, you've got areas with sidewalks in it. I don't know if we can put sidewalks. Do we have the authority to go into Pine Hill and put sidewalks in there? That isn't our property. And who's going to say they even want them? It's private property. We can't do that.
I believe any place that we're going to be putting sidewalk, there's either public right of way. I believe virtually all the areas are. There's some kind of public right of way.
What's the one next door to it there? Not Shadow Bend, Pine Hill. The other.
Fairway Green.
Fairway Green. Those two subdivisions, you're showing sidewalks needed in there. Whipple Tree. Where are you going to put sidewalks in Whipple Tree?
I think there are two different discussions that need to be had. The question, the true question before the board tonight is the second one, and it's about the fee to pay for them. Obviously, nothing would be installed before coming before the board anywhere. So the question is really about the process more than do you like where the red arrows are or where the red lines are. These were, again, what was identified by the active transportation plan, but you bring up a very good point that there may be some areas that simply cannot handle sidewalk because there's not enough room. And that would be done on an annual case-by-case basis, just like we do with our street improvement program.
What I was getting at was even more than that. What do we put in there? I think the plan that we got to look at is F3, the priority plan. That doesn't show all these unnecessary areas. This shows the important areas that need sidewalks. And based on this, maybe we don't need to raise fees or charge money. How fair would it be for the Tin Goose? If they would, they put their sidewalks in, and what would the difference have been with their permit fees if they had paid that 0.35%? Sidewalks probably only cost them $15,000-$20,000, maybe even not that much. What would the difference be? Would they be paying a lot more on the permit fee? And would it be fair that the bigger you build, the more you're paying?
There are two main points here, and one I think is this idea, perhaps we're getting caught up in the fact that it's an increase that's being specifically identified for sidewalks. Even with the increase, our permit fees would still be lower than our neighboring communities, which is important. The answer to the question, as the President asked, is although other communities may not be specifically calling out how they're paying for sidewalks, it's built into their tax rate or it's built into their permit fees, or what we're doing is, as the board has identified, trying to be more transparent with tell the people where their money is going, much like what we're talking about with stormwater and fighting the flood conditions in town. Identify specifically where that money is going. And that's what this plan is meant to address.
In 50 years of construction, I've yet to find a town that says, don't worry about the sidewalks, we're putting them in. When you're building that town and it calls for sidewalks, you put them in. There is no such thing as the village puts them all in. I think we're going down the wrong path here. I think if we're going to have a program to put in sidewalks that people have already contributed to and maybe even forgot about, that's a different story. But we get money for various things through all these motor fuel tax and everything else for our CIP project. Let's figure out on this priority list exactly what we want to get done for the next 5 years and go accordingly instead of saying $5.5 million over 15 years, we got to raise this and raise that. It's not fair. It's not fair to people that a guy comes in and builds a big factory and he's paying thousands of dollars for a sidewalk fund and he might not even need sidewalk, and some poor guy that's got a sidewalk out in front of his house that can't even get it repaired is got to pay if he puts an addition on. It's not fair. just like I say, I think we got, we got to do something. I don't know if this is the right path, but maybe between all this here, if we work on it, we can get something going. Thank you.
Trustee Hein?
Thank you. I think we should be taking the prioritized list at this time only and putting all our effort to get those easements, to get permission from the landowners. If the landowner has no sidewalks on his piece of property, he has to know that he's going to be putting sidewalks in, because the sidewalks are going to go in the same place, whatever he puts there. You take in case all the thoroughfares, Milwaukee Avenue, Dundee Road, 83, all of the important thoroughfares, we have vacant pieces of property that have been like that for years, and there are no sidewalks, only because they haven't been developed. The only time we go after somebody for sidewalks is when they come in for development. We should set a policy that all of those properties should have sidewalks in front of them. Because what's happening today, we are an older community, and we have to bridge these gaps in between the old and the new so that we have an active transportation plan. That's what it was designed to be. So I think we should cut this down a little bit, take it in moderation, and do the things that we absolutely have to do. And all the other sidewalks that are mundane, as far as I'm concerned, they're on private property. Either create an SSA for them or bring it up. It's up to them if they want sidewalks, not up to us. It's private property. Thank you.
Trustee Lang?
Thank you. Let's take the PUDs out of the equation right now, and because again, we don't know if they'll even fit in some of those places. It's pretty tight between the roads and the frontage of the house. So if we take that out of the equation now, you're looking at a plan that probably can be done with that F1 priority or F3 priority within 10 years. So let's do that.
But then again, I like to see how we fund this thing, a clear, versus just saying 0.35 tonight and say raise all the fees across the board and take those dollars and put it in the sidewalk. I like to see how the other towns are doing it. And if you need to increase your fees come budget time because you are so under cut on regarding how our fees are structured, then that's your department to come back to us and say, you know what, we're really hurting ourselves here and we're not up to par with everybody else around us. And shame on us for not maybe looking at it years ago or trying to build those fees up to do something. If you want to allocate dollars out of your own budget regarding sidewalks in here based on the fee revenue that are being generated, I think that's a good way to go. But I like to see what other towns are doing. I really do. And then take your priority list, excluding the PUDs like Trustee Lang said, and let's prioritize the sidewalks that we can actually get done in the next 24 months, 12 months, whatever, 3 years. And then find a funding mechanism to help pay for those things. I think it'd be clearer for us. I think there's a lot of gaps throughout this community that you have sidewalk, no sidewalk, no sidewalk, right on our main corridors here. And maybe that's what we look at, and then come up with a policy for new development in this community, whether it be in the industrial or commercial quadrants. You know what? You're going to contribute. Part of your permitting fee is going to be XYZ based on a percentage that you're going to contribute to a sidewalk fund that's going to help the entire community, or something different. But I think right now to give direction, to follow an active transportation plan and aggressively go after that, and aggressively across the board raise the permitting fees 1/3% is a lot, without any really clear direction from this board on exactly what are we approving tonight. I'm unclear, and I think we got to prioritize the priority list. Let's get it down to a science to where we need to be, and more important, let's take a priority inventory list of what right-of-ways we don't have that we're still going after. Because it's senseless to talk about sidewalks and put it on a priority list if we don't have the land to put it there.
Are TIF funds available to use in something like this?
Only if it's in a TIF district.
If it's in a TIF district, we can use it for sidewalk funds.
Infrastructure, sure.
We got some areas that we have TIFs in that need sidewalks.
Director Stavros?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that over the years, we have used the sidewalk fund extensively. $80,000 was put in sidewalks from Lake Cook Road to Dundee Road. That was out of the sidewalk fund, the contributions. McHenry Road on the west side was put in for contributions. Dundee Road from Village Hall to the bridge was put in for contribution out of the sidewalk fund. If you remember, that was an old 5-foot walk, back pitched, held water. So, I mean, we do use money out of the sidewalk fund. It's depleted right now down to 10,000 because we've been using it. But over the years, we have had money in that fund. Unfortunately, right now, we don't. But like Director Janik says, we've been hitting people up for this for years, and it's really not in the ordinance. The subdivisions are, and this does not apply to subdivisions. Am I correct, Mark? Under Title 17, they would still be required to put their sidewalks in?
That's correct. This is, I mean, that would have to be discussed. I mean, I don't think we could charge the sidewalks with a subdivision and then charge it at the same time for the construction fee. So it'd be one or the other, I believe.
Well, I'm glad to hear we had a sidewalk fund. Because for years, I was always asking, and not to see it on a budget as a line item, that we had a sidewalk fund with revenue in it and dollars in it to pay for all these tens of thousands of dollars worth of sidewalks throughout the community. I'm really happy to hear that tonight. I've sat up here almost 13 years, and that's the first I've heard of that. So anyway, where do you want to go with this, guys? Do we want to have them look at it again and bring some things back to us with some of the questions that were asked by all of us tonight and get more clarity out of this versus getting any solid consensus tonight and moving forward? Trustee Brady?
I don't want to kill the sidewalk thing because it is important.
It is.
But I don't like the way this is being funded. I think, and actually up until now, there's been some hidden portion of the general fund which all this money was put into that, like you said, nobody knew about. I like to see that fund being separated like any other funds, like the SURF fund and stuff like that, where we know what the amount is. And as time goes by and things develop, we maintain this priority list, and we identify the areas, and we actually go out and solicit funds with our plan in hand and the funds available to pay our share of it, and we go from there. I just don't think it would be fair about adding at least upping the permit fees just for this specific thing. If we got to raise them for other causes, fine, but I don't just think it's going to be fair. So I'd like to pursue it. Let's drop all the bells and whistles and get down to the meat of the thing, and that's the priority list and how we're going to manage it.
Okay. Trustee Kruger?
I too think that we should focus on the priority areas that need sidewalks. I'm not a fan, even though a 0.35% increase on permits wouldn't alienate people from building, even though the addition, as John said, would still keep us lower than other communities. I still think it gives a bad taste, you know, to the person who's building that says, I'm contributing to a sidewalk and I don't need one, you know, and I'd rather us not fall into that or find ourselves in that corner. But I do think that the priority areas of sidewalks should be taken care of first, not so much you know, it's almost like the bigger picture. This F1 map is just too big a scope to look at right now.
Okay. Trustee Hein?
I'm for modifying the plan, and I think staff has enough dialogue from us tonight that they got an idea on what we're looking for. I also have a question, because this is the active transportation plan, are there any grants available through this program? And also, can we use motor fuel tax for putting in sidewalks?
Currently, we haven't gotten, or we haven't been able to obtain, I'm not sure of any grants that communities get just for if it's we have a grant obviously for the path connection between Wheeling and Northbrook. But for small gaps like we have, at least I don't know of any, we can of course look for grants to help, you know, fund this as well. Currently, I don't know of any. But But our sidewalk program is not part of MFT.
Can it be?
I guess it's possible.
I actually don't believe that you can use MFT money. Michael, do you know?
I don't know. That's something we can look into and report back on.
In my previous life in Public Works, I remember looking into this, and if I'm recalling correctly, and we will get you an answer.
Thank you.
If I recall correctly, you cannot use MFT money for sidewalks.
Fine. Trustee Vogel?
I'm for working on a priority, but the money's got to come someplace, and we can't, I mean, even if it could, MFT funds could be used for sidewalks, don't we have enough problems with our roads that need to be taken care of with that fund? So we're just borrowing from one fund to help the other, and we got to stop that. So I'm in favor of some type of a flat rate increase, whether it be 0.35, if that's what we think we need to do it. I'm in favor of that.
Trustee Lang?
Agreed.
And I agree. And what I agree is that hopefully you can get back to us by the first workshop in August. I don't want to sit on this any longer.
Okay.
Get some answers, see what grants are out there, prioritize your list. Talk to the attorneys, see what they're working on right now regarding the right-of-way acquisitions, and come up with a formula here that's fair across the board that everybody knows that they're paying for.
Okay.
Thanks. Number 8.
Discussion regarding industrial lane redevelopment plan.
Mr. Janik, Mr. Spondelis, why don't you start us?
It's going to be a tag team effort.
Okay.
Before you this evening is an update. Several months ago, the board was presented with a larger number of options than you are this evening concerning industrial lane. To be clear, this is not an airport project. Obviously, the airport is part of industrial lane, but there are greater issues than just the needs of the airport. I will say that they were consulted and did contribute to these discussions as far as the use of industrial lane related to airport-like uses. This evening, what we've done, and we have representatives from TESCA, our consultant, as you may recall, helped to whittle down from I think there were 6 options the last time.
There were 5 total, and we brought them down to 3. Yes, correct.
Thank you. There are 3 this evening that deal with, and you'll see on the overhead, this is an overview of industrial lane all the way down to Sumac, and you can see some of the runway there as well. We've discussed at length some of the problems with this entire area that was annexed about 10 years ago, and looking for the appropriate solutions that both rectify the situation happening down there, build off of the asset that is the airport, the entrance to our community, and is the right thing for us economically. This evening there are 3 options that we will discuss in detail, along with some financial planning, as the board has heard in the past, about staff's recommendation to reset the TIF that is currently substantially underwater, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through our plan. Todd, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President and trustees, for having me, giving me the time to speak in front of you. I wanted to give you a brief background on John had already given you a background on the area. Just want to give you some project background, get into the concepts, and then get into the financial analysis. It's going to be in a table format so you can see the 3 options side by side, give you a better way of comparison, and then we'll move on to recommendations. This is study area, as John had pointed out. This gives you a little more detail. You can see that waste management in green covers a major percentage of the area on the southwest side of the property or of the site, and then SCT Environment also has a pretty substantial piece right next to waste management. And the industrial lane on the north side of the property is just made up of several different property owners and businesses as well. Just some project background. The TIF, Southeast TIF, was established in 2008, although as John had mentioned, there is some idea of potentially re-looking at that TIF district to perhaps reset it to 2012. Airport, when we spoke to them at the beginning of the project, they would like to be more self-sufficient to expand or attract new uses. In terms of new uses, ideally they'd be more compatible with an airport, and we'll get into that in a couple minutes. In terms of immovable objects, Waste Management and SET are two examples of businesses that it would be pretty difficult to move them in terms of siting them, giving them the proper space and facilities they need to operate. In the process of doing these in the past several months, we also discovered that there are possibly a few other businesses besides Waste Management and SET that may have issues with moving. But one thing that we did talk about is that it'd be up to the village to not only speak and have conversations with these property owners to help them out, but TIF funds would be eligible to help provide moving expenses for any businesses that may wish to either relocate within Wheeling or a neighboring community. Code compliance was a major issue. We can get into that later. Flexibility, the road network, you'll see in the next three concepts that there was flexibility in modifying the road network, especially industrial lane. There is potential for land swaps that would help facilitate any potential redevelopment concepts. There were significant floodplain issues being near the creek and just the different topography in the areas. So we did look at that. Gaywalt Hamilton, which has been an engineer for the village, has helped us on floodplain issues, and then access to municipal and sewer and water utilities was also discussed and analyzed. So there are three concepts in front of you. I'm going to go, there's concept A, B, and C. I'll briefly go through each one to give you a brief background. This just gives you a general sense of what concept A looks like. Concept A has a major redevelopment, but it reroutes industrial lane. You'll see if you've, I'm not sure if you can see the arrow, but I'm pointing that right now industrial lane curves towards this point on Milwaukee Avenue, but we have it rerouting to the upper northeast corner of the site slightly, just to give them a better realignment for an interior road. You have most of your redevelopment here in red along Milwaukee Avenue, providing you a greater presence. Businesses, a greater presence along a major thoroughfare on Milwaukee. Waste Management, SET stay in the same general areas with potential for a little bit of expansion. And then in pink on the northwest corner is airport expansion, and then green is detention. To give you a better sense of how buildings may lay out, this is concept A in a more site plan vantage point. You can see, as mentioned before, your buildings, you have a restaurant, flight school, flex office space, and car rental facilities, and a gas station. Those are some just examples that we used for this particular exercise. You see that they have a much greater presence along Milwaukee Avenue, and then you see the airport expansion with additional hangars here on the northwest corner, and then SET and Waste Management on the bottom, and then dry detention between the developments. The second concept, concept B, is fairly similar, except in this case we do not move industrial lane. Industrial lane and Sumac Road maintain their existing alignments. You'll see that in this scenario, the redevelopment is slightly bigger, but it still maintains that presence along Milwaukee Avenue. The major difference here is the airport expansion area is smaller, and SET actually moves to the north of Waste Management. That would have to be worked out with the property owners to see if that's feasible. In a more site plan view, you could see that the building presence is just as strong along Milwaukee. That there is some setback for these buildings, marked number 3, which would be flex office space, which could also, in addition to office, it could hold a flight school or a trade school that would be relevant to the airport. You have restaurant, flight school, car rental facility, and gas station, similar to concept A here. You have the dry stormwater detention, and then you have the hangars in the back. The reason why we use dry stormwater detention rather than wet, when we worked with the engineers, is that wet detention attracts waterfowl, and as you all probably know, with airports, that's not something that they like. So that's why we went with dry detention. And then concept C, the third and final concept, this is actually this is the more market-driven where it's a lot more the private sector funding their project rather than the village putting in more of their footing the bill for that. Here you maintain the access points at Sumac and Industrial Lane as we did in option B, but here instead of having the redevelopment along Milwaukee Avenue, it basically stays the same. You start combining smaller sites into larger sites, preferably sites that are 3 acres or larger to maintain Cook County or a county stormwater management requirements that they need. Waste management and SCT generally stay in the same areas, with waste management potentially getting a little bit bigger. But in most cases, this is kind of pretty similar to what you have now, except you start making bigger pods for redevelopment along Industrial Lane. In site plan form, this just gives you an idea of how that might lay out with buildings. We use a pretty similar set of potential uses. We have the restaurant, retail strip center, we have a flight school, flex office space, and so on. And you can see how that lays out here. To give you a comparison, this will start, the next few slides will give you a series of tables to compare the different options. If you would like me to go back to take a look at any of the site plans, definitely let me know. Here on this slide, you can see that the redevelopment areas is the biggest in option B, although in option C, if all those red areas in option C were to redevelop, that's about 19 acres of redevelopment area versus 10 in option B. But that's driven by the market, so it depends on what the market is able to bring to the village on this site. The airport expansion is the biggest in option A, just because option B has slightly less redevelopment area than option B. And then in terms of waste management and SCT, you can see how they most likely either expand in options A and B, and then they stay the same size in option C. We already covered the land use. These are generally the types of land uses that are mostly compatible with an airport. So we definitely went over that earlier. In terms of stormwater management, the main thing to look on here, there's a lot of numbers, but the main thing is that in general, there is mostly enough stormwater detention, and there is a surplus of land area to accommodate stormwater detention in options A and C. In option B, in red, you can see that there's a deficit of 0.8 acre feet. Although there is a deficit, one way to accommodate or to remedy that deficit is to provide stormwater in different areas, maybe reducing the amount of redevelopment that you have, or you could also, if a developer is willing to put some of their detention underground in vaults below parking. In terms of flood storage, that's actually storing floodwater. You'll see at the bottom that all options A through C do have a surplus of land area that could accommodate flood storage. In terms of finances, here, if you look at the second row, in terms of the total amount of property taxes that would be generated by any new redevelopment over the 23 years life of the TIF and the redevelopment that would come with this area, you'll see that they all generate a pretty level amount of property taxes, with option B generating the most at about 16.6 million, and option C generating the least at 10.9. 10.9 is still pretty significant. You'll see that although if you look at the last column, that is what would happen if there was no redevelopment, and you'll see that option C is only slightly higher than what would happen if you didn't have any redevelopment on the subject site, and you'll see that options B and C are above about 4.7 and about $6 million higher than no redevelopment. In the next two slides, I'm going to show you what would, comparing the public investment into the projects and then the private investments. On the slide that you see before you, this is the public investments. You'll see on the total public costs, on the far left side, you'll see the different costs that go into redevelopment. You have land acquisition, legal costs, all through utility extensions, and all the options in terms of across A, B, and C. The The village, whether it's through the TIF fund, would pay for road improvements, new traffic signal, utility extension, and stormwater detention. And then in various cases, depending on the scenario, options A and B, the public would be paying for things like land acquisition and site preparation and legal costs. And then option C, which is more the market-driven, which is the private sector taking care of that, you'll see that they foot more of that cost. And then if you look at the final line item, total public costs, you'll see that options B and C are about 20 million of public costs, and then option C is only about 6.5 million of public costs for redevelopment. If you compare that to what the private sector would foot, the total costs here, you'll see that in option C, the private sector would foot about 41.1 million compared to 9.6 in option A and 15 in option B. So you'll see, in that case, you'll see what the public covers and what the private sector covers. So in terms of what does this all mean, one way to do it is just to look at cost versus revenues. What are you putting in and what benefit do you get out of it? As we covered earlier, the total public costs, you'll see in the first line, you'll see that option A and B are about $20 million of public costs versus 6.5 in option C. And then when you compare that to the revenues, as we saw earlier, they all generate between 10 and 16 million dollars of tax revenue over the 23-year life of the TIF district. So if you compare those costs and revenues, you'll see that only option C provides a surplus or cost surplus above the revenues. So that if you only consider tax revenue or property tax revenue as the only criteria that you would choose to select options A, B, or C, just looking at this table, you would probably you would obviously choose C because it's all surplus. But if we go on to start looking at other tax revenues that also generate from redevelopment, in addition to property taxes, there's sales tax. The village has a food and beverage tax, and then there's utility taxes. So if you start considering all those additional tax revenues, we'll start seeing that when you add all those together and compare those revenues against the costs, they all come out with a positive surplus. Option C is still the highest at $14 million versus only $3.3 or $3.4 million for option B, and option A is the lowest at a little over $250,000. They're all still positive, but if you still only look at the highest surplus, you're clearly going to look at option C. But if you want to look in a more broader scale in terms of what redevelopment could mean for not only the village but for the site and the airport, you have to also consider the types of transformative change that you would like to see on this site. So if you only go with option C, that's just waiting for the private sector to rebound, but also let them choose what is best for the market. But if you could go with options A and B, where there's clearly more public costs, but you're also trying to, you're priming the pump for them, so to speak, so that you're acquiring property to them. You're making more property improvements to prepare the sites for redevelopment. And in that sense, you are putting in more public costs, but you're making it more enticing for a developer to come in and bring a redevelopment to the site and to the village. So just keep those in mind as we consider the different options for the site. And I'll end this discussion, or end this part of the discussion, with just the recommendations that we have discussed with the village. And John will go into detail on some of these as well. There's 6 of them we had. One was to reset the start date of the Southeast TIF District. It was started in 2008. I think it's under consideration to look at resetting to 2012, I believe. Number 2 is keep all 3 concepts on the table. That way you have a lot more options to look at. Obviously tonight, if you want to just go with one, that's your prerogative as a board. Number 3 is pursue a phased approach to municipal investment, so that you might try to invest a little bit at a time. Maybe say you provide X% of redevelopment for 3 years and see what the market responds to. And if nothing happens, then you start investing a little bit more, maybe acquire more land, maybe doing a little more property assembly and so on. Recommendation 4 is pursue village-initiated land assembly. I just went over that. Number 5 is provide flexibility for negotiation with businesses that might be distinctively burdened. We already discussed waste management and SET. It is hard to move such businesses such as them, but as we also, during our discussions the past several months, other businesses might also be distinctively burdened because of maybe the facilities they need, and then it's harder for them to move. So that's best to keep communication channels open with them. And then 6, the final recommendation is maintain flexibility of the redevelopment concepts. For example, if in the examples that we provided, the studies that we did, we only had 1 restaurant, but if 2 developers come in with 2 restaurants and they both become viable options for the village, definitely keep that on the table, even though it doesn't conform to the plans that you saw in front. Just have that flexibility and just make sure that it works for the villages and for the businesses. And I will hand it over to John, unless there's any questions, unless we wanted to hold.
Thanks, Todd.
Sure.
John?
Thank you. As Todd said, and as you've seen throughout this presentation, there are a couple things that have been repeated, flexibility being one of them and investment being the other. Staff's recommendation, as outlined in the memo, is absolutely option C, not just because it has the least financial impact to the public right now, but also because it does allow the market to drive redevelopment in the area. But it also allows flexibility to come back and revisit the plan as we take steps to change the landscape of the area. Option C is aggressively pursuing code enforcement in an area that has not seen code enforcement in the past. You all know the history of annexation with Industrial Lane and some of the problems that we've faced and conquered in the past, at least to a degree, regarding infrastructure in the area. It's staff's recommendation that if we reset the TIF, and we'll talk about that in a little more specificity here in a minute, if we reset the TIF and at the same time, because that is a process, that's not something that happens overnight, and at the same time begin enforcing our codes down there, some of the problem and some of the opportunities are going to present themselves. Some of the problems are going to go away and new opportunities will present themselves. So what we feel is resetting the TIF is going to buy us time in order to flesh that out, see how the area changes on its own, and at the same time provide the timetable that's necessary for us to look at, okay, now that we've reset the TIF, where are we at financially? How much are we willing to invest in that area? How much can we afford to invest in the area? Because we keep the options open with looking at, say, option B. Obviously, option A and option B come with pretty pictures, and that's certainly something that we would all like to see, but we also think that option C is a vehicle to get there that doesn't come with such a high public cost. Is the next slide going into... Okay, thank you.
Sure.
The highlighted area you see on the screen is the current TIF as it exists today, and then the next slide incorporates 2 additional parcels on the west side that fit all the qualifications for the TIF. And maybe this would be a good time to talk, and Michael, maybe you could fill in some of the gaps here about not why. I'll walk through the process of how, but maybe why. Can you talk about how the EAV is currently, I believe, $10 million under what it was in 2008?
Right, that's correct. The latest information we have on the TIF district is from the 2011 tax year. The 2012 tax year numbers are not out yet. But the original EAV, the base EAV for the Southeast TIF was about $66 million, and currently it's at approximately $56 million. So you would have to obviously see $10 million in growth just to get back to even before you start to bring in any increment at all. And that's really the rationale behind resetting the TIF district.
And we really see this as an integral part to any option before you this evening. It's a complicated process to work through, but it's an easy concept to understand. Obviously, recapturing that money based on today's dollars. The process is we would have to terminate the TIF district. We would do that by an ordinance terminating the TIF district in October of this year. It would not take place until the end of December of this year. We would have to manage a redevelopment agreement that is in existence with International Aviation. That's something we can go into more detail on as the ordinance comes before you, but there was a payout that would have to be rectified and balanced based on the fact that the TIF is now ending. We would have to change our taxing district surplus revenue declaration resolution from 2008. That set forth the village's intent to declare a surplus. We would have to amend that since obviously the TIF is now ending, and then we would have to create a new Southeast TIF district. Those are the basic steps. Obviously, there are other governmental bodies. There are public hearings that need to take place. If you'd like me to go through all those steps, I certainly can, but those are the four large steps that would have to take place in order to reset the Southeast TIF. The next slide, this walks us through in some of the same detail the public hearings as I discussed, an amendment to the comprehensive plan. This is based on option C, commence code enforcement. Our suggestion is, and we can get into this as we get into the question portion, our recommendation is to send a letter to all the businesses informing them of the decision if the board decides to move forward with option C, letting them know what's coming and allowing, again, the market to take care of itself. We anticipate that because of some of the parking restrictions in the area that some of these businesses will take advantage of the opportunities of available space elsewhere in the village because they understand that they're unable to function if we are to hold them accountable to our codes. And maybe this is a good time to open this up for questions because a lot of this I think is going to come up in question and answer as opposed to just me talking.
Trustee Lang.
Thank you. You know, option C seems to be the most, make the most financial sense. And what's good about this plan is that if we leave all these options on the table and borrow from some of them, like for instance, option C is a great plan, but it doesn't capture all the frontage on Milwaukee Avenue. And I think it's key that we capture that frontage on Milwaukee Avenue. That will infect some of the, I think the storage facility would be one of the, probably the largest pieces of property that would be affected by that. But overall, the plan and what you're talking about, if we do keep some of these options on the table, and as that TIF changes and grows, depending on what happens with it, we can borrow even more areas from B and A. And when I say capture the frontage on Milwaukee, I also mean north, when you're talking TIFs, north of Hintz Road as well. There's some area there. Now, that map was on and off really quick. Did that, the TIF boundaries, John, did that change to?
Only to include west. 2 additional properties on the west.
On the west only,
It's owned by the
okay.
airport.
Correct.
Right.
Not north of Hintz.
Correct.
Okay. And is that in a different TIF district as well?
Do you mind going back?
Sure.
It's a south TIF, isn't it?
I think it's in a no man's land.
South Milwaukee.
There are portions, and guys help me out here where I need to, there are portions just north of, well, you can't see where I'm pointing, just north of the north boundary line, correct?
Plum Creek on Club. That's in
Yeah, so that
anything west of Wolf Road is not.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. All right. In any event, it looks like it incorporates all that, but I don't want to mix the two up right now. Going back with the plan for C, I do recommend that we stick with C, but then have, like you said, the options of borrowing from some of the other 2 plans and really getting all that frontage on Milwaukee. I think that's really key. And as for the other businesses, start policing them and let's see how that all irons out. for next steps as well. I'm totally in favor of that.
Trustee Vogel?
I'm in favor of option C also at this point, but a couple of questions about some of the other options. Again, option C with the opportunity to borrow from B and A. The airport expansion that was listed or shown on A and B, do we anticipate the airport would buy that property, buy those parcels of land?
Can you go back just so that everyone sees where we're?
Probably not.
In discussions with the airport, there was a lot of talk about what could be used, what that land could be used for. Additional hangars was the end result, based on the limited ability for them to expand. The answer to your question is I think we would want them to.
So it would become part of the airport?
Yes.
In both cases? In that Plan A and B, there was another slide further in that showed that with other than property taxes, eventually Plan A and B would end up showing a surplus, small, that one right there. Much of that sales tax revenue in A and B was a result of a calculation for their expansion.
These calculations actually do not account for any of the hangars because that would be development by the airport. So this is only what...
the leftover?
Yeah, the redevelopment areas, correct.
Okay. All right.
And there are obviously a lot of assumptions built in there. You know,
Right.
it's easy enough to do these calculations when you're sort of playing SimCity as far as recognizing what belongs there, but getting the end user in is always the key.
Correct.
Okay, so none of this would be part of the 50% revenue sharing number?
That's correct.
That would reduce that surplus? Okay, thank you.
Trustee Hein?
Thank you. I'm also in favor of option C and leaving some of our other options open on the other plans. When you mentioned that the airport, you would like to see the airport acquire some of that land over there, that would be a purchase from the private entities by the airport?
I would assume that they would need to purchase the land and then find lessees, sorry.
So they would be buying that land from the private people over there that are existing?
Oh, I'm sorry, was that your question? Yes.
Okay.
They could.
They could.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Trustee Kruger?
I too like option C, as long as we remain flexible about, future development as the market dictates. But I have a question about the changing of the TIF boundaries. Was there residential in that acreage on the west side?
Go back to that screen again.
No.
No, that's all
Yeah, it says Wolf Road.
industrial?
It's in there.
What, those two additional?
Well, right now, the TIF has residential in it, the existing TIF,
It does?
right?
Correct.
Right. Wolf Run you're referring to? To the west of Wolf Road?
On the west of Wolf Road?
South of Hintz is a subdivision called Wolf Run. There are homes there.
Okay.
That's been in the TIF.
Right.
Okay.
That's been in the TIF.
Right.
The properties
Yes.
that they're expanding is airport property owned on West Wolf Road, that the airport's actually gotten permission now, if they wanted to sell it to private development or the city or what have you for development, they've got permission from the FAA to go ahead and do so.
Okay.
Mr. President, there's also River Mills Townhome Development, which is part of the TIF district.
That's correct. But the surplus of that development is being distributed to the other tax
Yes.
providers. Yeah, see, it is.
That's all I have, thanks.
Trustee Brady?
I told you no.
Yeah. Me?
Yes, sir?
C is, in my mind, the only option we really have. I don't know what the status of the debt repair place or the repair garage is, but they're gonna occupy the corner there, where right now we've got restaurants and coffee shops and retail strip center designated. It's gonna just wipe out everything else. And beyond those two parcels there, anything to the west, should be airport-related, because people just aren't going to drive down this road to go shopping any place else. And I think the use of the airport in various things you have listed here would fit perfect. You know, flight school, airplane parts, et cetera, a car rental facility, you know, and even the gas station on the other side. This fits what's there for the least amount of money, and I think we'll get the biggest bang for our buck when this goes.
Okay, thank you. I like C as well. Regarding closing the TIF and reestablishing that TIF, well, that's interesting. We're taking a bath on all our TIFs now. If that's the case, if the AAVs are taking a hit like that, any new development would take years for us to even get to a break-even point. So that's something for another discussion other than this TIF, to really look at these other TIFs of ours and see what we need to do here. Because it's, in my opinion, it's a losing proposition. We're never going to make money on any of these TIFs if our EAVs are getting hit that hard. And they have been getting hard. You've been telling us it has. So that's probably another workshop.
There's two TIF districts that are in this situation, this one and the town center.
Right. So, well, town center's a good example right there we're being faced with. I'm all for that too. Regarding talking to the businesses and code enforcement, I'd like to see that draft letter. These are businesses that have been in town. They are a Wheeling business. There are problems there. We've known that since we forcibly annexed them into our community. But we still need to take care of business over there and then come up with a game plan on how we're going to get these properties, or how we're going to acquire properties, or how we're going to get the airport involved. What grant options do they have, or tools do they have? Because they're not going to buy anything unless they get grant money, because they don't have it in their reserves to turn around and acquire properties. But again, infrastructure is a major issue there. We have a development going there on the corner of Milwaukee Avenue. There's going to be some infrastructure put in there. You guys are already having your CIP and water projects, additional water looping mechanisms that you want to put in there. So, yeah, we need to look at this thing and come up with that draft letter that you recommended. Again, I think the consensus here is to reestablish the TIF. Am I right, from everybody here? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
And I know Trustee Lang has another question. Go ahead.
You bring up a great point about relocation of some of these businesses. And let's be proactive with that letter and maybe set aside or look for places that some of these businesses can be relocated to ahead of time and help them out.
I know, John, you've talked about that.
Make it a lot easier for them.
Right.
We've actually started that process.
That's correct, and we have our industrial space availability reports as well as vacant land. They're on the website, so we can assist them with those specific properties.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else, guys? You got your direction?
I do.
Thank you. Thanks, Todd. Official communication, I know Manager Svandilis has an item he wants to discuss with all of us.
It's the All John Show tonight. And actually, since we have our village planner here, if there are any questions, he can answer these. There's been a request. Andrew had sent an memo to the board because he received a request from the Wheeling Wheelmen in order to name a portion of our bike path after Phyllis Harmon. She was the founder of the cycling club and a member of the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame. We don't necessarily have a process that we can bring to you that says this person qualifies to have something named after them. Looking at and hearing some of the stories and reading some of the research on her life and her accomplishments, she certainly seems worthy of such an honor, and we thought we would bring this to you tonight in official communications. If you would like, I can bring it back to you formally to adopt a portion of the path to be named after her, but we wanted to bring this to you as a heads up and seek your direction if you'd like to see it come back to you formally. Andrew, do you want to talk a little more detail?
Sure. The Wheelmen, when they first approached the village, specifically noted that Phyllis Harmon had a major contribution to the world of cycling. She's a cycling advocate. She's trying to get access for all types of cycling, recreational, for transportation, commuting, etc. Like John said, she had founded one of the largest cycling organizations in this area. She's worked nationally. She is currently living in Florida. and the wheelmen. We're looking for some segment of the path network that would be an appropriate fit. The thing that came to mind for the village staff was this new connection in the Forest Preserve area. It connects Wheeling to Northbrook, sort of symbolically connects people into this network that goes north-south through the Forest Preserve. So they like the idea as well, and we'd like to move forward with it.
Let's get a consensus. Trustee Brady?
What's the status of Starbucks on Lake Cook? Anybody know what's this?
Well, I'm getting a consensus regarding naming this bike.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was general.
Okay.
Go ahead with it, yes.
Okay. Trustee Kruger?
I'm in favor.
Trustee Hein?
Nothing.
No, regarding a consensus, what he's talking about here.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes.
Trustee Vogel? Trustee? Yes. And myself, yes.
I will put it on consent agenda then at our next regular meeting.
And let's go back to Mr. Trustee Brady with the Starbucks.
Okay, I just had a question. What's happening with that?
Okay.
It seems like nothing's going on.
Mr. Janik?
A Starbucks being demolition of the structure on site. As you know or might not know, they're using part of the foundation of the building, the existing building, but they started demolition without a demolition permit from Cook County. So they were stopped, and they have to go back, do environmental review, get their permit, and then start it up again.
Thank you. That's it.
Trustee Kruger?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Trustee Hein?
Nothing.
Trustee Vogel?
Just to reiterate, Dean, what you had said about the 4th of July, and to thank village staff. It was a great time, and everybody that I talked to is looking forward to something next year.
Thank you. Trustee Lang?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And myself, too, to the
I read
entire
his notes.
staff. The entire staff, you know what, we pulled this thing off, all of us collectively, in the last month, and everybody came together and worked, Public Works, Police, Fire, CD, the administration, I mean, all of us, all our contributors, the Park District, oh my God, they were great as well. I mean, everybody got excited about it. It was like this at 6 o'clock, and we were all kind of getting scared, thinking this was going to be a flop because the rain was coming, but the rain stayed east of 294. And Chief, I think you and I had talked, you had figured maybe around 4,000 people and change, maybe a little bit more than that because of the overflow going north of Dundee Road. But you know what, everybody said it was a good time, and it was family, and it was nice to see a lot of, like George had said, people that you hadn't seen in a while, and just talk and just have a good time. And I thank the entire staff for that, and our sponsors as well, because without them, it would have been a little tough finagling the budget a little bit, but they made it easy for all of us in the community, and I appreciate that. Do you have anything else?
I do not.
Okay. We do have executive session this evening to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a specific employee or employees of the village. I entertain a motion to recess into executive session.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Kruger. Second by Trustee Hein. Roll call, please.
Trustee Brady?
Yes.
Trustee Kruger?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Vogel?
Yes.
Trustee Hein?
Yes.
President Juris?
Yes. Okay, and we'll go into executive session at 8:35. Good night, everybody. Thank you.